Hey there, this is Michelle and welcome back to the Canadian History, a Chronology channel. Today's episode, number 21, is our last episode on the fall of New France. And the centerpiece of this episode is a very, very sad note in history for Canada. Today, we'll cover the expulsion of the Acadians from Acadia. Now, just as a reminder, I'd like to bring you back up to speed from the previous episode. In that episode, we learned that the Golden Age of Acadia ran from 1713 to 1743, and that the Acadians were considered as the neutral French by the British, and that both the French forts of Louisbourg and Beausejour fell to the British. New France was beginning to fall apart, piece by piece. Also in the last episode, we met Charles Lawrence, who later became governor of Nova Scotia. He was the one who sent Robert Monckton to capture and attack Fort Beausejour from the French along the New Brunswick border. Okay, moving on from this. For Charles Lawrence, as governor, life was simple. One was either for or against. There was no in-between position for Charles. So with that as his mindset, something had to be done about the Acadians. The Acadians must either take the unconditional oath or they must leave Nova Scotia. He called this his final resolution. Sounds somewhat eerily familiar, doesn't it? Charles summoned a delegation of Acadians to decide for the others. The Acadians refused again to take the oath, so Charles had them imprisoned. A second delegation of Acadians arrived to demand the release of the others, and they too were imprisoned. Charles was not playing around. So it started. At the time, the largest French community was in the Minas Basin, Acadia's breadbasket, and it was named Grand Pré. On September 5, 1755, the Acadian farmers were gathered at their church to hear the royal proclamation by the British. The Acadians had been declared as non-citizens. Their lands and livestock was to be confiscated and farms destroyed. Of course, the Acadians went into an uproar, but the British soldiers were ready, and more than 2,000 Acadians were taken prisoner. They were herded into transport ships at gunpoint, while the British soldiers laid waste to the land, burning homes, farms, and mills. Some 700 buildings alone were destroyed. The Great Expulsion had begun. This displacement of the Acadians was unprecedented in North American history. In a matter of months, Acadia would cease to exist. Families were torn apart and separated. Nothing was left behind for any escapees to hide or seek shelter in. And the transport ships? They were overcrowded, even by the standards of the day. They were more a prison than a transport ship. When the first boatload of Acadians did arrive finally in New York, they were described by the New Englanders as poor, naked, and destitute. The Acadians were scattered throughout England's North American colonies, as thousands more fled Ile Royale, Cape Breton, and Ile Saint-Jean, Prince Edward Island. And when the settlement and fortress of Louisbourg was captured by the British in 1758, deportation started up again. The Acadians were hunted down. Resistors were locked up, with hundreds of them being sent to England, spending 7 years in internment camps there. Those lucky enough to be repatriated back to France actually found themselves in a foreign country after having been gone from their homeland for more than 100 years. After a few years, these New France colonists would return to New France and head to Louisiana, which was becoming an Acadia in exile type of home. The descendants of these Acadians would become known later on as Cajuns. Other Acadians went north into Madawaska region, what is now the northwestern area of New Brunswick. They grew into a lumberjack culture called Les Brayons. The deportation of the Acadians lasted from 1755 to 1762 and almost completely depopulated the region of the French-speaking Acadians. some 10,000 people were forcefully evicted and sent as refugees to foreign lands. And more than 3,000 would die from shipwrecks, smallpox, typhoid, and yellow fever resulting from their prison ships. A very, very sad and troubling part of our Canadian history for sure. Well, that's it for the short history of the fall of New France, Part 4, our last episode on the fall. In summary, we learned that the British under Charles Lawrence created a final resolution that saw the Acadians being rounded up and shipped off to foreign lands. Between 1755 and 1762, some 10,000 Acadians were forcefully evicted from Nova Scotia, with many later ending up in Louisiana and their descendants becoming known as Cajuns. Now please stay tuned for the next episode, episode 22, The Conquest of New France, Part 1, where we delve into the conquest of New France by the British. This will mark the end of New France. Now remember, at any time, feel free to leave comments or questions below, and I'll do my best to respond to them all. And please, be a true Canadian and be polite. And if you like this content, please subscribe to my channel and give it a thumbs up. And hit the bell if you'd like to be notified of any new content. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.